to take out the trash. And I take that to heart. Like, to this day, never too good to do those jobs, because the moment you start to think you're better than anyone else, you have poisoned yourself. You were on the dark path. So giving out parking tickets was, well, I'm thankful I got to give out parking tickets to really nice cars at University of San Diego.
Were you married yet?
I got married during
while you were in college.
While I was in college, and I had my first child. My wife and I had our first child during University of San Diego.
Then when do you start applying for med school?
So I applied between second and third year of the University of San Diego in the summertime.
Did you think where'd you apply? Everywhere?
I applied, I think I applied to like 10, 15 schools. I applied to some really nice schools, and I told you earlier that all my father wanted me to do was go to Harvard Medical School. And that's not the reason. At least I tell myself that's not the reason why I did it. Maybe it is. Maybe some psychologist listening to this is like, "Oh, that's totally why you went there." But for me, it was. It was very impactful having friends, Ryan, Mike, Mark, JT. I could go on of the people who have sacrificed and were much braver than I could ever be. And that does a couple things to you. It humbles you for life. I think if you remember that, right? Knowing that no matter what you do in this lifetime, it will never be enough. And not that it's a comparison, but that pursuit is important. But it made me want to fill in that void, to make up for the good they would have done. And that's how a lot of us honor our friends. That's certainly how I honor my friends. And for me, that's being as impactful as possible to this world. It doesn't matter what that is. It could be in the form of serving as a team guy or serving as a physician, or what my path has taken me to now is serving as an astronaut. I wanted to be impactful. And to me, going to Harvard was giving me a bigger platform to be impactful. It wasn't the name, it wasn't the brand, it wasn't the education. You'd be fooling yourself to think that going to Harvard is going to make you a better doctor. That's not true at all. You would be just as good of a doctor anywhere you go to in this country. But it was having a platform to be able to affect positive change. And that's why I wanted to go to an institution like Johns Hopkins or Harvard, really. And for me, that transition, the years of University of San Diego and the early years of medical school were the hardest. Sometimes it's hard. It's weird to say, but some of the hardest years of my life, because it was different. I couldn't grind through it by just hitting harder.
Wait, this is going from University of San Diego to Harvard?
Or just going from the teams to University of San Diego.
Okay.
That transition, it was some of the hardest years of my life, because it's not like you could just push through like you can in some of the things you do in buds or in teams. And buds is a challenge, but as you and I know, training is nothing compared to war. Like, you think training is hard? You think Hell Week is hard? It's hard, right? Until you get hit in the face in a real combat operation. And then you realize, oh, I've reset my benchmark for what is hard or what is painful or what is suffering. And even having that benchmark going into transitioning to civilian life, it was hard for me. I was trying to fit in 4-year degree in 3 years, trying to do really well because I knew I had to get good grades to be considered for a school like Harvard. I had my first child. I was working part-time. But probably the worst of it was I was not right in the head with my decompression with post-war. I took a lot of that anger and hatred in my heart, and I still had it there, and I lost a little bit of who I was. And it took years for me to regain that. And it was only through the grace of time, of sometimes prayer, of friends, of mentors, of making mistakes, that I was able to find that light and get a little bit back of who I was and learn through the process.
What did it look like how did that anger and hatred manifest itself when you're at the University of San Diego on a sunny day and you're, in the library and you got to turn in a paper?
So I haven't really talked about this, but for me, I felt I had a huge obligation to work as hard as I could to do the things I wanted to do because I owed it to Mark and Mikey and Ryan. It didn't manifest itself in the libraries of University of San Diego. It manifested itself in my relationships with the people I loved. And not that I became my father and was abusive or verbally abusive to the people, but I took my anger out in less than healthy ways. I am sad and embarrassed to admit, but I'd get the littlest things would tick me off, and I would find myself punching a wall or breaking something. And I think about that now, and I understand the frame of mind I was in and the kind of hurt I was in post-war, and I just didn't have the healthiest way to deal with that. And now that years have gone by and I've talked to our own platoon mates who have gone through their own battles, their demons, post-war, I realized I wasn't the only one. But a lot of it I had to deal with on my own or through the patience of my wife, who has been my biggest supporter through all of this. It took years for me to learn to be human again, to let go of that anger, to sublimate all those experiences, those raw emotions into good. And when I think about some of my behavior at the university, and not that I was completely out of line or anything. I mean, I was a good student. I did well. If you talk to people who I was in class with, I was not controversial in any ways, but when I had strong opinions, I was respectful and I voiced them. And one of the biggest, it's hard for me to say it. I still to this day have a hard time saying it just because it's just a word it's very foreign to someone who is a SEAL. But learning to lower my defenses and be vulnerable was the light, one of the biggest lights for me learning to be more of a human. And that happened in medical school. I remember this. I had an experience in medical school where we do these talks about our experiences in the hospital, and we were talking about like the something called the hidden curriculum. I can't even tell you what that is now, but we were talking. To say it was a touchy-feely kind of conversation that's basically kind of what it was. And I hated these talks. I hated talking about it, about my feelings to my classmates. And I think a lot of it was just pride, because I was like, I've been through so much more than dealing with the expectations of our supervisors in this medical school and this hidden curriculum, and the difficulties of dealing with sick and dying patients. Like, I've been through worse. Like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And it made for a very rough person to be around. And I don't think I wore my emotions on my face, and I just didn't participate in those discussions. And I had two caring physicians, professors at the time, pull me into their office and be like, look, it's very visible that you don't enjoy these conversations. And you pull out your computer and you're hard to talk to, and you detach yourself. And like, what's going on? Like, this is a serious problem. And I took that to heart, and I re-examined where I was coming from. And I realized that I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to talk about my feelings this way because there was a lot of other things, a lot of other baggage I had still. But having that conversation and that guidance to open up really helped me become a better human in many ways, which then led to being a better follower, being a better leader. So those are one of many experiences in that phase of life that helped me be a better candidate for NASA and for other opportunities that have come.
I'm trying to overlay my own experiences, kind of parallel to yours, and just thinking about things. And I always say I got very, very lucky. One of the things that I got incredibly lucky with was when we got home from Ramadi, two things happened. Number one, I had a wife and 3 kids, all at the optimum age, as far as I can tell, the optimum age to connect with in the they're young enough that they're looking at you like you're a superhero. They're old enough that they're not babies, and I can see in their eyes like they're people. I guess that's the big point. Like they were old enough, they were in that age group, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, where they're looking at me. I'm looking at a little person, right? So I have that going on. And plus my wife, of course. So I'm coming home to that. And then at the same time, I take over the training and where I'm around team guys. Not only am I around team guys, but all these little emotions that you have, well, you went through workup when I was running training with Seth. Like I was allowed to express my emotions about the teams and doing a good job and cover move, and you better, hey, leader, you better step up and take charge, and hey, you better get out. Like, not only was I allowed to do that, it was beneficial for the guys that were going through the training because they got to see that I really cared about this and I didn't want anything to happen to them, and like that. So I got to like let those emotions out enough, and then at the same time in my home life, I was like, oh, I was looking at a little human being and going, wait a second, I can't, this isn't a place to be emotional or be angry. This kid's looking at me like I'm a superhero and like I should be calm, and that's what I'm going to be. So kind of a cool, very lucky situation that on the one hand, I got to express and be around team guys and be raw as raw could be with team guys. And at the same time, learn that, oh, by the way, it's not normal. It always freaked out Leif and Seth that I would go home and I never would swear in front of my kids. And like, obviously in front of a SEAL platoon, I would just go off and I'd come home and just be, I don't want to say I'd be a different person, but I'd kind of be a different person. I'd kind of learned to, all right, this is okay over here. It's not okay over there. You look at a 5-year-old girl or a 4-year-old boy and you go, you know what? This kid's counting on me to make some halfway decent decisions. And I think that made me very quickly figure out what I needed to do to move forward. And whereas for you, I'm sitting there drawing that parallel course, you're getting taken from that team guy environment to this non-team guy environment to the nth degree. And boom, here you go. You got to box all that stuff up and figure out what to do with it real quick. And there's no real good outlet. And the outlet becomes, the wall, the freaking plate, the whatever. That anger needs an outlet. And when you let it out, it's not in the best place. And it takes you a little while to figure out, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yeah. What you described took me years to learn. And it is probably one of the most important traits of being a leader is having the emotional and social intelligence of knowing your audience, knowing who you're talking to, and being dynamic enough that you can switch and craft your language, your body language, your tone of voice, everything you do to suit the person you're talking to.